دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء قسما بالله رب العالمين ما ارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار ظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome to Finding Me today on the ITV networks with two very special guests and I think two incredible minds, and I'm really privileged to have with me Professor Farid Esack and Abbasi, both from the University of Johannesburg from the Department of Religion Studies, and we're talking something very important and I think of relevance to my audience, and that is about critical Muslim studies. I would like to go straight into this interview because I have too many questions. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Professor.
Wa alaikum assalam. Always a delight to be with you, Quraysha.
And Alex, to you too, welcome. And I'm so glad that you can make it with your purple shirt and your Los Angeles in Arabic.
Happy to be here. Shukran.
Professor, we have a lot to talk about, and I think critical Muslim studies is an important topic for South African Muslims. I think we have fallen for the longest time into this complacency, into believing that South African Muslims are wonderful and that we've done fantastic things, which has prevented us from taking our knowledge further, from critiquing things that we have adopted as a status quo. Now, you were introducing a summer school on critical Muslim studies in January 2018, and you're focusing on very many topics. But first, what made you decide to bring it here to South Africa? Because you do it every year in Grenada.
Yes. Grenada, the Critical Muslim Summer Schools in Grenada, which was the heartland of Muslim Europe, the heartland of Muslim civilization for centuries. In many ways, the faculty there, they're from the north. It's pretty expensive to go to Grenada, and yet the summer school has attracted a number of graduate students, professors, academics, activists from different parts of the world. But in some ways, the Grenada Summer School has to be relocated also. It's wonderful that it continues, and it must continue. And it was a way of bringing it to the south. But not just bringing it to the south, is also putting the south into critical Muslim studies. So having it in the south, having most of your lecturers coming from the south, this was, and I'm talking about the global south as in not Europe, not North America. And so it's also the idea of, wait, you know, the global south, people living in the two-third worlds, they don't only have things that we have to learn from others, we also have things that we have to offer others. And decoloniality, the idea of the colonial is not past. The colonizers haven't really left us. It lives on. And part of decoloniality is to say that, wait, the global south has something to say to the world. Wait, Islam has something to say to the world. And this is what was behind our bringing the Critical Muslim Summer School to South Africa.
Now, Alex, you're a co-convener for this Critical Muslim Summer School. You've participated in Grenada for a few years, and I actually enjoyed your company when I was in Grenada. It was a fantastic learning experience, and from you as well, Professor, your lectures were really amazing and stimulating. It really made me sit down and question many things, in spite of having taken an education for 4 years in the Darul Uloom. So, Alex, how were you inspired to get involved in this, and what do you think is the most important aspect of the summer school, you know, in terms of reaching out to the youth and all those who would be interested in furthering their knowledge, critically thinking about Islam?
Well, I think, like you mentioned, Quraysha, I first came to critical Muslim studies in the Grenada Summer School. I went twice as a student, and now I go to help as an organizer. And really for me, I mean, just on a kind of deeply personal level, the summer school changed my life. It radically transformed my worldview and how I related not only to the world but to Islam, And it's geared my own personal journey and studies ever since. And now I'm doing a PhD in South Africa at the University of Johannesburg with Professor Farid. So I mean, just on a purely personal level, it's made me who I am in many ways. And I think that one of the most powerful things about the summer school is that it's building off pre-existing understandings and critiques of the world we live in. And it's deepening them to an extent that previous critiques may not have gone. So one thing about decoloniality is that it has kind of a deeper criticism of modernity and the way in which we understand so many different systems that we deal with. So the religious knowledge we have as Muslims. First, what's Islam? Where did this Islam we get come from? Because a lot of the Islam that we grew up with is something that's been fabricated. It's something that, okay, we have teachers and they're sincere and they're teaching us something that is very real and it's important to us, but there are larger power dynamics at play. And if left interrogated, in many ways we can be perpetuating systems of oppression, we can be perpetuating systems of injustice on an intellectual level, on a societal level, in our communities. And decoloniality is one way to enter that conversation as Muslims to re-examine and first ask the question, what is Islam and what has come to us right here and right now?
So Prof, he raises very important questions, and the first thing I want to pick up on, anybody watching this, and I know the South African Muslim community in many ways is reactionary. So Alex said, Islam has been fabricated, and they'll say, what is he talking about, But if you look at it in the way we interact in our daily existence with other people, that mindset has certainly it has been filtered through a colonial understanding. And we were speaking about this a little earlier, and that is simply just in terms of black Muslims and Indian Muslim interaction and the recent dilemma that we had when Malema made those comments. And the reaction from the Indian community was, again, very reactionary, rather than taking a stand back and saying something to think about. So in many ways, that kind of fabrications is where, although Islam says there's no racism, there's no hierarchy, but your internalization of that is completely warped, and the way you act is warped, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, the one is transcendental Islam. The one is the Islam that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. The one is the Islam that we were left with by the prophets and by the companions and the great legal minds of our tradition. The other is the cultural filters through which we understand Islam. And the hard reality in South Africa is that our Islam is understood through our historical and cultural lenses. And so you've got the one dominant set of lens, which is the so-called Cape Malay Islam, with its own traditions, all valued. And then you've got a dominant Indian Islam, and that is further divided into the Gujarati Islam, the Gujarati understanding, or the Cockneys and the Memons and so on. And the conflation, for example, between Urdu and Arabic, the conflation between Indo-Pakistani dress and what is Islamic dress. The expectations that if you say Gigi, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, that you expected to speak like that. It's a reflection of a dominant Indian influence, and that is not without its merits. But South Africa doesn't comprise of Indian and Malay Muslims. Their lenses of Islam may have become normative over the years. But two other big things have happened. The one is there's a large community of Muslims who are black South Africans. And black South Africans are, whether we like it or not, they're beginning to arrive in the country of their own birth. They're beginning to appear. They're beginning to be visible. They are Maulanas, And no longer do they keep quiet. They're beginning to speak up. They're beginning to see how paternalistic they are being treated, our African brothers. We never say our Memon brothers, our Gujarati brothers. Sometimes Indian Muslims would say our Malay brothers. But in this brother term, there is clearly an element of looking down. The term brother is nice, but okay.
The contextual framing,
Right.
yes.
And then there is another problem, in the philosophical sense of the word. The new South Africa has seen an influx of Somali Muslims, of Senegalese Muslims, the Francophone Muslims. And here, these Muslims don't want to learn from us.
Yes.
In fact, they have been Muslims long before Islam reached Java. Before Islam reached India, Islam had reached Africa already. So we have nothing to teach them. And all the time we thought that we and our Qiblas, your Qibla of Deoband or your Qibla of Bareilly Sharif, that was it. And so these are the new realities. And so part of decoloniality is, how do you recognize that there are gems and value on the margins of this Muslim, on the margins of this Muslim communities? And so critical Muslim studies must confront the question of dominant expressions of Islam, Indian Islam on the one hand, Malay Islam on the other hand, and these older, more African expressions of Islam, and the newer, very, very competent black leadership amongst Muslims that are emerging. I mean, you see this in our leadership structures. All the big mosques in our cities, often majority congregants are non-Indian,
Yes.
but the leadership, and nobody thinks, you know,
There's something wrong with the
that
pattern.
there's something wrong with the pattern.
Yes.
So in the same way that people are challenging, how come all university professors are white and all the students are black? What's being done to change things? In the same way, I think, inevitably, we will have to confront this question. And people who problematize the fact that all the people sitting in business class are white and a couple of black civil servants, the people who problematize this, the same people are seeing a problem with our mosques. Indian, Malay, and occasionally, I mean, if you have a white convert, oh my gosh, that's really the cherry on the cake for us to get that guy as the imam of our mosque, you know?
Yes.
But as for a black imam in a mainstream Muslim mosque, no, we're not there yet. And so critical Muslim studies challenges all of these assumptions.
Now, we're going to go to a break just now, but I just very quickly want to ask both of you, and you can both respond to this. Somebody who's sitting and watching this will say, okay, but I haven't studied Islam. I'm not an Islamic scholar. In other words, I haven't been to madrasa, or I haven't done hadith, or I haven't done Quran. So can I come to critical Muslim studies? Can I participate? I mean, will it help me? Will I understand better?
In some ways, the summer school is about the teaching of content. But far more important is ways of approaching our faith. And so it's not so much about whether you can engage with all the content that is being dished out. It is whether you are ready to be challenged in how you're looking at our tradition and at the power around us. Not just Indian Malay power, also political power, also the USA and its imperialism and how it's forcing a peaceful Islam onto all of us. Are you able to shift your mental frame? And to have an intelligent mental frame, you don't require a depth of knowledge.
Just an inquiring mind. What do you say, Alex?
I have two things. One thing to say earlier rather than later. The actual title of the summer school is Critical Muslim Studies, Decolonial Struggles, and Liberation Theologies. I just want to mention that second part because liberation theology is something that played a very vital role in the anti-apartheid struggle here in South Africa. And in a way, liberation theology was Islamic decoloniality before decoloniality became so big.
Right.
it's a radical critique of the West, but also of our own traditions. That's the one thing, just to clarify. And the second is, in terms of reaching out to certain populations and who should think about applying, definitely students. We're looking, I mean, it's an academic program, it's very rigorous. There's, so it's academics, but it's also people involved in the NGO, the non-government organization sector in society. Activists and students is the main target, but all are welcome to apply.
Okay, so we're going to break, but when we come back, I just want to talk a little bit more about the speakers who will be coming. So we'll see you after the break.
بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me today in the ITV networks with Professor Farid, Esack and Abbasi, a PhD candidate, both from the University of Johannesburg, and we're talking critical Muslim studies and of course the upcoming critical Muslim studies summer school that will be held in Cape Town 2018 January. Now, before we went into the break, Alex, you made a very important point, and you spoke about liberation theology. But again, knowing my community and knowing the people that we engage with on a daily basis, the critique will come up and say, okay, but what are these guys going to try and teach? Because, I mean, are they going to run down the Deobandi school? Are they going to run down the Sufis? You know, what is your idea here? Because I want to take this out, because I want to make sure that people who can really benefit from the school, and I did, and I've studied in Dar al-Ulum, and I came to your school, and it's made me so much more of a better student. I want them to overcome these fears, and you know, sometimes through fear they don't ask the questions, so I'm asking those questions on your part. You know, how do you respond to something like that?
You're asking me first.
Yes, I'm asking you first, because as a student, you've come there and you know, you've seen what's happened, and then Farid can respond.
Okay. I think the one principle within the decoloniality framework is that we have an understanding of the world in which there's a critique of the West, there's a critique of the West inside us, what we've internalized from this world that we grew up in, but there's also an appreciation of where we come from. So you affirm your tradition and what's been marginalized by dominant power, by systems of oppression, but you also do approach where you come from, your traditions, your Islam, your community, your culture, in a critical way. And it's not in a way in which you think your tradition is inferior. It's not in a way in which you think your tradition is something that has nothing to say to the world, but it is a way in which you can come back to your tradition with a new set of glasses, with new eyes to say, what can I learn from understanding the larger power structures in this world, the larger discourses, and where what I actually learned about Islam came from.
That's excellent.
And for me, the most important, it's very, very important to understand this, Quraysha, that there is a dominant kind of idea floating around in the world today that the primary problem that civilization has is with Islam. And Islam must change. Islam has become more moderate, Islam has become more peaceful, Islam has become more this, Islam has become this. We say that that is absolute rubbish. Our primary contradiction today is not with Islam. Muslims and the way many Muslims are responding to the pressures around us, the pressures of occupation, the pressures of the exploitation of the two-third world, the problems of colonialism, the invasion of Muslim lands, the way Muslims are often responding to those problems are problematic. But Muslims and Islam are not the problem. Our responses are problematic, but we're not the problem. The problem is the colonial. The problem is the attempts to reshape Islam to fit the demands of the powerful and the vicious and the exploiters and the oppression. So decoloniality is clear about this. Our problem isn't with Muslims. Muslim responses to all of this is problematic at times. That's the first thing. But at the same time, in our responses to the problems of the world, we have to be careful that we don't replicate the oppression that we are experiencing.
Yes.
You know, sometimes I think Muslims' problems with Zionism, it comes out in a bit of a racist form, where they say the Jews control the media, the Jews this, the Jews that. I sometimes think that the problem isn't with the idea of hegemony and control of the media. The problem is we're not the ones doing the control of the media.
Yes.
And so it is saying that, wait, hegemony, this control, this desire to exercise power, it is problematic. But guys, in our confronting Fir'aun, can we also look at ourselves and chisel and remove the traces of Fir'auniyat, of Pharaohism inside ourselves? And so how, when Muslims challenge Fir'aun, can you also look at that little masculine Fir'aun that wants to treat women like Bani Israel were treated by Fir'aun? That little Fir'aun inside this Muslim identity that wants to treat black people like Bani Israel were treated by Fir'aun. Overall, we know that our struggle is to destroy Fir'aun. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى.
Yes.
Go to Fir'aun. Fir'aun is rebelling against God. And so our challenge is against hegemony and power, the control of the entire world by the greed of predominantly Western powers, and how they want to shape Islam into a nice little cat that's domesticated and behave well and curls up to whenever this imperialist daddy arrives home at night. So our problem is not fundamentally with the Muslim community, but we also acknowledge that in our responses to the crimes committed against the Muslim world, we are capable of also being little Fir'auns in relationships to our many, many little Bani Israel communities in our own
And that's an
midst.
indication of the fact that the Muslim mind is in many ways still very colonized, isn't it? So the starting point is decolonizing the mind, and that's what critical Muslim studies is about.
Absolutely. The decolonization of the Muslim, to understand how can I go and at the same time not become that which we as Muslims are obliged to resist and to fight.
So from there to those who will be presenting the lectures, and I think you have a powerful team of academics and individuals who will be unpacking these various discourses. Can you name some of the presenters or the academics who will be present?
Sure. We have a number of internationally renowned scholars coming to the program from many different places. But the important thing, which is one of the missions behind the summer school happening in Cape Town, is that the majority are from the Global South and or teaching in the Global South.
Right.
I mean, there's a number of topics ranging from you know, trying to understand Islamism and what does that word mean. We hear it so often in the media and news and in our masjids. Topics about gender in Islam, gender justice, Islamophobia. We have maybe I think I call him the decolonial da'i, Ramon Grosfogal.
Yes.
He's become
He's very special.
Yes, kind of one of the main figures and intellectuals and decolonial thinkers will be there. Ramon Grosfogal, also Dr. Syed Farid Al-Attas is coming from Malaysia, and he's done some really amazing work on Ibn Khaldun and decolonizing sociology. And not just in the sense of, you know, one problem in universities is that they might mention one African thinker. They might mention Frantz Fanon, you know, they might mention Ibn Arabi, they might mention, but they don't actually take their thought and their knowledge as something we can build from.
Right.
So someone like Dr. Al-Attas, who's coming from Malaysia, has done that work, where he said, how can we build a Khaldunian sociology and how can it contribute to the world?
I think that's important.
We're running out of time, Alex. We also have people like Sheikh Dr. Michael Mumisa. He's from Zimbabwe, currently at the University of Cambridge. We have Professor Saadi Sheikh from the University of Cape Town, and then a local, Habiba Badrun, who's been teaching for a number of years at Penn State University. And then there is, of course, Nelson Maldonado Torres, one of the leading thinkers in the field of global Islam. And then two very, very local characters, Dr. Shahid Mati from the University of Johannesburg and Farid Esack.
Yeah.
But we also have a panel of local activists where they'll be dealing with a number of different issues and how they've confronted them inside South Africa. It's a great program with picnics and a braai and cultural stuff and local touring stuff.
Okay, so to get the formalities, you will give us the website where they can apply to, and I'll put that on the screen. And students can still apply, right? You've extended the deadline?
Yes, the deadline has been extended until the end of August, and you can apply at criticalmuslimct.com. Again, criticalmuslimct.com.
Okay, that's fantastic. So hopefully we'll get that together for you. And I hope that, we will start getting this community of young minds in South Africa who can start to challenge the narrative, because that's what it's all about. Farid, your parting words?
I think Cape Town, South Africa, has made an enormous, they've really punched above their weight internationally, ranging from, whether you like it or not, people like Sheikh Madida, people like Maulana Sadiq Desai in the Eastern Cape, people like Ibrahim Musa, like Saadi Sheikh, a number of these, Abdul Qadir Tayyib, Sheikh Saadullah Khan. South Africans have punched above their weight internationally. And the Cape Town Summer School is, again, both a manifestation of how South African Muslims can make a significant contribution to international thinking. So South African Muslims, more than welcome to these things, but also the broader community out there. South Africa, despite its many inadequacies, has a lot to offer intellectually and creatively, Islamically and ideologically to the rest of the world.
Alex, and in parting, would you say it's time for a new discussion, a new discourse to open up what is Islam actually?
Most definitely.
Okay, so with that, thank you very much for sharing your time and sharing your insights. And I wish you, inshallah, every success. And if I can, I'm going to make sure that I'm there as well. So with that, fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
قسما بالله رب العالمين وارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء.
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم